Okay, so good morning. It's Aaron Gallagher. This is sort of a precursor to the rest of the Daniel chapter 11 lesson. Yesterday morning at South Haven, we started Daniel chapter 11. Unfortunately, some of the AV stuff, I don't know what happened, but the first about 10 minutes of the class did not record. And so I figured I'd just start it, go back through it again now, and lead up until we can jump back to the class that we filmed yesterday at South Haven picks back up. So Daniel chapter 11, we've been covering Daniel this quarter. We've done pretty much one chapter a week. And so we're getting close to the end of the quarter, and we're doing Daniel chapter 11 today. Some people have said, one commentator said this is the most specific predictive chapter in the entire Old Testament. About 130 predictions, one guy said, are made in the first 35 verses of this chapter. And so if you ever wanted a test for Deuteronomy 18:20 through 22, which basically said if a prophet says something and it comes to pass, no, he's from God. But if he says something and it doesn't come to pass, he's not from God. If you're ever looking for a test of this in Scripture, this would be one of those tests. This chapter would be a great one. And in fact, chapters like this are one of the reasons that people who deny Bible inspiration fight so hard to say that the book of Daniel was not written by Daniel, but was written by some person years later, more like a historian who looked back at what already happened and wrote this, right? Because they deny the fact that God or one of his spokesmen could actually look into the future and write something like this. So let's give you a quick summary of the chapter, okay? The real focus of this chapter is a timeline, right? It's going to be a predictive timeline from the time of Persia all the way up through the time that Rome comes onto the scene, okay? In chapter 12, you're going to have some more, I guess, continuation of this vision. But this vision is unlike, is different than some of the other visions because it's looking even further into the future. Now, you had some visions like Daniel 9:24 through 27, the vision of the 70 weeks, the prophecy of the 70 weeks, that looked as far forward as this one will. But some of the ones earlier in Daniel chapter 2, it looked to the days of Rome and then stopped. Daniel 7, it looked to the days of Rome and then stopped. Daniel 8 really focused more on the conflict between Persia and Greece, and then the four generals that came after Alexander the Great, and how basically it came to them all the way down to this guy, Antiochus Epiphanes, who was the little horn of chapter 8. Now, this is going to cover that exact same period of time, but it's going to be way more detailed talking about Antiochus. For instance, in Daniel 11, there's 45 verses. The first four verses, verses 1 through 4, are going to talk about Persian and Greek history, and even the breaking up of Alexander the Great's kingdom to his four generals. Okay, that's what happened in world history. That's only the first four verses. So Persian and Greek history is really kind of skimmed over because it's dealt with other places in more detail. Then Daniel 11 verses 5 through 20, about 15 verses, 16 verses. It's going to talk about two of those four generals that came from Alexander the Great. And those two generals will form these kingdoms, the kingdom of Syria in the north, which is called the King of the North, and the kingdom of the south, the king of the south, would be the leader around Egypt. And the Syrian will be called the Seleucids, named after their first leader. And the southern Egyptian kingdom will be called the Ptolemies, named after their first leader, Ptolemy. And so these 16 verses cover about 13 different kings, one after the other, okay? I'll show you some images on PowerPoint that hopefully will make this a little bit easier to traffic and understand, okay? And these 13 kings that are described from Egypt and Syria, okay, the southern king of the south, the southern kingdom, and king of the north, the northern kingdom, they all lead up 13 kings in 16 verses to someone named Antiochus IV Epiphanes. You have 14, 15 verses dedicated just to the discussion of this guy, which he's really, I think, the focal point of this chapter. He's somebody that as we get there, you'll see he, at one point, we'll discuss in detail later, he was a ruler he was the king of the north, ruler of the Syrian, the northern Seleucid Empire. And he went south to Egypt, and he got there, and Rome was waiting for him. And Rome turned him back. And as he went back up through, he went right by Jerusalem and Palestine and destroyed the temple, offered pig, which is an unclean animal under the law of Moses, which to the Jews would be an abomination. And he basically forbade circumcision. He forbade keeping the Sabbath and all these other laws from the law of Moses. And so, in a sense, he really commits what's called the abomination of desolation, killed lots of people, killed babies and hung them around their mothers' necks if they circumcised them and disobeyed his orders. He was a really evil ruler in Jewish history. And so this is prophesying hundreds of years in the future that this is going to come to pass. Okay, so it's very predictive. So that's Daniel 11, 21 through 35. And then Daniel 11, 36 through 45, at the end of the chapter, there's some disagreement on who it's referencing. Some people think it's still speaking about Antiochus Epiphanes IV. They say, hey, that's the context. Unfortunately, it seems historically a lot of the things attributed to this king of the north don't fit with Antiochus Epiphanes. It seems like they fit more with the nation of Rome, who, ironically, the story we just told, had just defeated Antiochus and told him to go back to his country and surrender. And so that seems to be who it shifts to. And those events we'll talk about when we get there. It'll actually be in the next class when we begin chapter 12. We're going to finish up chapter 11. We only got through, I don't know, maybe 30 verses of chapter 11 in the first class. So we'll talk about that. But it really, I think in verses 36 through 45, or maybe even just verses 40 through 45, it shifts to Rome, which is remember, leading up to chapter 12, which is going to be a different vision that I believe applies to Rome. Okay. So the class cut off, I think, the first 4 or 5 verses. So we're going to redo here on this video the first 4 or 5 verses. If you were present in the class that was filmed yesterday, from when I'm filming this, then I'll try to cover exactly what I covered yesterday. So Daniel chapter 11 and verse 1 starts out like this. Also in the first year of Darius the Mede, I, even I, stood up to confirm and strengthen him. Now remember, this is a continuation of the vision in chapter 10. And so in chapter 10, there was this angelic being that came and talked to Daniel and said that, Daniel, you've been praying for 21 days. I left when you started praying, but it took me 21 days to get to you because I had to fight with the prince of Persia. And Michael, the archangel, stood up and helped me fight against him. And so we talked about in the last class, is this figurative language? Maybe. It does seem to give the fact, or it gives the impression that providentially, in a different dimension that we don't know about, there are angels who are working, some for good, some for evil. But we got to be careful, like I said in that class, not to go further than scriptures give us. But it's a pretty interesting chapter. It's a very interesting chapter. So, verse 2. Now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings will arise in Persia, and the 4th will be far richer than them all. And by his strength, through his riches, he will stir up all against the realm of Greece. Now, Daniel 11, verse 1 said, who was the ruler? Darius the Mede. Okay, verse 2 says there's going to be 3 more kings after him, and there's going to be a 4th who's going to be much more rich than them all, and he's going to stir up the realm of Greece. He's going to fight wars against Greece. All right. So verse 1, the current king was it says Darius the Mede in 11, but in 10:1, who was the king? Cyrus was the king of Persia. I said Darius. Cyrus was the king of Persia, according to chapter 10 and verse 1. Then there was 3 more kings after him, okay? Cambyses, who ruled from 530 to 522. Guamata, or Pseudo-Smyrtus. Some of these kings have different names that are referenced, but he ruled about 522, and that was it, very short time. Then Darius the First Histopses ruled from about 522 to 486. I don't really think you need to remember these dates. If you have your notes that you keep with you for reference later, you really, I don't think, even need to remember these names. I, of course, have them written in my Bible because I like to write notes in my Bible. But then it says you're going to have this 4th king who's going to be richer than them all. This is likely the king Xerxes the First, or from the book of Esther, he's also called Ahasuerus. Okay, this is the king that you read about in Esther chapter 1, verses 1 through 8. Esther 1:1 says, now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus. Now this was the Ahasuerus who reigned over 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia. Okay, so this guy runs a big kingdom. Okay, and so Ahasuerus, or Xerxes, did try to extend his empire into Greece. Daniel 8, 3 through 8 likely is referencing this. But when Xerxes or Ahasuerus tried that, he was met by an army of united Greek city-states in about 479 BC. If you've heard of the story of the 300 Spartans that fought Xerxes at Thermopylae, that would be a reference to the battles at this time with Xerxes, that king from that movie. There were also battles that followed at Salamis and many other battles. But really what happened is the Greek city-states united against the much larger Persian army. And this is one of the things that caused them to unite. The 300 Spartans at Thermopylae, the invasion of this Persian ruler trying to conquer Greece and cause those city-states to unite. Okay, so that's what verse 1 and 2 are talking about. Look at Daniel 11:3. Then a mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. Now, between verses 2 and 3, there's about a 150-year jump from Xerxes to Alexander. You'd say, well, wait, why is there such a big time jump? Well, the chapter is really not concerned with giving you a year-by-year, ruler-by-ruler summary. It's really trying to build and get you down to the main focus of the chapter, which is going to be Antiochus IV Epiphanes, who doesn't come until Alexander the Great's kingdom is broken up, okay? So in verse 3, a mighty king shall arise. This is referencing Alexander the Great, who's going to rule with great dominion and do according to his will. Now, this is Alexander the Great, the son of Philip of Macedon II, okay? He ruled from 382 to about 336. After the death, so Philip of Macedon, I believe, is who ruled from that. Because after the death of Philip of Macedon, Alexander was about 21 years old, and he took the reins of the kingdom, and he crossed the Aegean Sea and attacked the mighty Persian Empire. Okay, and he had reached and conquered Susa, the Persian capital, within 1 year of the beginning of his conquest. Okay, so you have a 21-year-old whose dad is assassinated. He takes the throne, and he crosses the Aegean Sea to go take over this, to fight the Persian Empire, and within a year conquered their capital. Okay. And so by the age of 30, which was in 327 BC, okay, so he was even crossing over the Himalayas into India, and he died on the shores of the Indian Ocean shortly after that. So earlier I said 382 to 336. That is the life of Philip of Macedon, okay? 336 is when Philip of Macedon dies, okay? His son Alexander takes over at 21, and then by 327 BC, the age of 30, he had crossed over the Himalayas into India, and then he died about 2 or 3 years later at the age of 32 to 33. Okay, so one verse really dedicated to Alexander the Great in this chapter. Okay, it's not the point of the vision. Look at verse 4. When he had arisen, Alexander the Great, his kingdom shall be broken up and divided towards the four winds of heaven. Okay, but not among his posterity, not among his his children, nor according to his dominion with which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be uprooted even for others besides these. So after his death, as earlier chapters have referenced, even his half-brother, Alexander's half-brother, his son, his prime minister, they were all assassinated, okay? Which meant there's no heir to the kingdom of Alexander. So his generals divided the kingdom amongst themselves. And so Macedon and Greece went to Antipater and Cassander. Lysimachus took Thrace and Asia Minor. Seleucus took Syria, and Ptolemy took Palestine and Egypt. Now, I believe I'm sharing my screen. Let me open up a PowerPoint. So let me go to this slide. So if you look here, I hope you can see this slide. If not, I'll try to add it later. You can see that the divisions of Greece, about 301 BC, okay? You have Ptolemy, okay? Ptolemy took this area down here, Egypt and Palestine, okay, where Jerusalem is, and parts of Syria, okay, up through Palestine. This is going to turn into the kings of the south, you'll see, and it's going to be a reference to Egypt, all right? Then you have this Lysimachus, who took Thrace and part of Asia Minor, okay? You have Cassander, who took Macedonia and part of Greece, and then you have Seleucus, all right, who took what was the Persian Empire, Asia Minor, which would be up here, okay, part of it, northern Syria up here, Mesopotamia, and the rest of the east, okay? Now, from here on out in this kingdom, these really two, the king of the north, the king of the south, are going to be the focuses of the rest of this chapter and how their interactions affected Jerusalem. Remember, Daniel is a Jew, and the whole point of this is to tell Daniel what's going to happen in the future of the Jewish people. And he's going to do that by talking about the battles between the kings of the north Syria, the Seleucids. And if you notice, you ever hear the Seleucid Empire. Here's why. This guy, this general, his name was Seleucus. So it was named after him, the Seleucid Empire. The general here that took over the Egyptian area, Ptolemy. So you're going to see the Ptolemaic Empire. If you read about this, or I may reference it, you're also going to see a lot of these rulers name themselves after him. Ptolemy the First, Ptolemy the Second, all the way up to Ptolemy the Eighth, who's the brother of the famous Cleopatra, who married Mark Antony when Julius Caesar, she was a lover to Julius Caesar first, and then after he was assassinated, she went back to Egypt. We'll get to that later. Okay, and Seleucus. So this is going to be the Syrian. It's going to be Seleucus the First, the Second, then Antiochus the First, Second, Third, all the way up to Antiochus the Fourth Epiphanes, who's really the focus of this chapter. Okay, so those four kingdoms came from the division of Alexander the Great's kingdom. Okay, and so that's really what the rest of the chapter is going to deal with. Okay, now from here, the chapter gets a bit complicated. All right, if it's the first time you've studied it, don't get frustrated. Just give yourself some what's the right word? Some slack. Cut yourself some slack, because from here there's a lot of similarity of names. There's a lot of similarity of battles, I guess. But this is why it's such a specific prophecy. Okay, let me show you this slide here. Maybe this will help. This is a graph that I found on the internet, and it talks about here the northern kingdom, the kings of the north. Okay, the southern kingdom, the kings of the south. Now the western kingdoms, Lysimachus and Cassander, that's what was referenced over here. So these really aren't going to be much of a focus after we leave this verse. Okay, we're going to start focusing on the king of the north, king of the south, southern kingdom, and the northern kingdom. And this is really what these verses are referring to. Okay, so as we go through these verses, I'll probably leave this chart up, and you'll be able to look through this chart and get a summary of what's happening in this chapter. Okay, so starting in Daniel chapter 11 and verse 5. Now, I believe this is where the auditorium class, picks back up. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this video off now, splice the two together, and you should be jumping back to the auditorium class. If you have any questions, let me know. And thanks for watching these lessons. We'll talk to you soon.
Verse 5. Now, from here it gets complicated, right? Why? Because you're basically looking at this prophetic description and trying to match it up with world history, okay? There's pretty much, I'd say, uniform agreement between even scholars that are premillennial that would say, oh, the end of the chapter is talking about the Antichrist. Even they don't disagree all the way up to about 35, that all of this is talking about Persia to Greece to this king of the north, king of the south. Ptolemies, who represent who? Egypt. When I say Ptolemy, it means Egypt. And when I say Seleucid or Antiochus, that's referencing Syria. Okay, so we'll use those interchangeably. Okay. Daniel 11:5. Also the king of the south shall become strong, as well as one of his princes, and shall gain power over him and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion. Now, in my notes, I have which Ptolemy this is referencing, right? I have like Ptolemy the First Soter, and I give you he reigned from 323 to 285. You don't need to memorize that, I don't think, unless you're in school, right? I think basically the point of it is really just the overarching historicity of what's being prophesied hundreds of years in the future, all right? And the one from the king of the north would be Seleucus I Nicator, and one of his princes did conquer the south, the king of the south. And notice the names. The king of the south's name is Ptolemy the First Soter. Who do you think these guys that come after him are going to be named after? Him, Ptolemy, right? And Seleucus I Nicator, right? He's the one that's going to be representing the king of the north. A lot of these kings of the north are going to therefore be named after who? Seleucus, right? The Seleucid Empire, the Ptolemaic Empire, right? That's where they're going to get a lot of these names. All right, so look at Daniel 11:6. At the end of some years, they, Ptolemy and Seleucus, shall join forces, for the daughter of the king of the south shall go to the king of the north to make an agreement, but she shall not retain the power of her authority, and neither he nor his authority shall stand. But she shall be given up with those who brought her, and with him who begot her, and with him who strengthened her in those times. Right. This is where I said it gets a little bit complicated. Right? We're going to read the verse again. I'm going to insert some names for you, okay? At the end of some years, Ptolemy, who's the king of the what? South. Ptolemy. It's okay, don't worry. Hey, I do the same thing on my notes. Sometimes I'm reading them, I go, that doesn't make sense because I typed the wrong one, okay? So Ptolemy is in the south, Egypt, okay? and Seleucus is in the north. They joined forces. Well, the daughter of the king of the south, her name was Bernice, and she was the daughter of Ptolemy Philadelphus. And she was actually given to Antiochus II Theos to make an agreement, all right? At one point in these battles, going back and forth, they considered peace. And the Egyptian king gave his daughter Bernice to Antiochus, the king of the north, right? They basically had a marriage, which a lot of times, if you've ever watched any, ancient kings and knights in different warring nations, what's one way they made peace sometimes?
Marry off their daughter or something.
Yeah, because then what happens? This guy doesn't want to fight the dad of his wife. You can imagine how that would go in the house, right? And the dad doesn't want to fight against a nation where he would potentially have to kill his daughter's husband, okay? So that's what happened here. Unfortunately, to make it work, Antiochus from Syria had to divorce his wife and disinherit his 2 sons, right? And so his former wife didn't like this. What do you think she did? Well, she actually assassinated Bernice, the younger wife, right? So she got mad about it. She assassinated the younger wife. And then she assassinated Antiochus II, her former husband, right? And then her son inherited the throne, okay? So if you want to read through and look at what each of these phrases is referencing, you can do that. I think you can do it from the notes. But I'm just trying to give you a big picture of what the verse is referencing, right? And so Berenice, okay, it's complicated, who was given to marry, right, Antiochus. She goes up and marries him. The ex-wife gets mad, kills him, kills the son. Well, guess what? Bernice came from Egypt. Guess who's in charge now? Her brother becomes king. So guess what her brother does? Look at the next verse, 11:7. But from a branch of her, Bernice, the one who was given to marriage and was assassinated, her roots, her brother Ptolemy is who it's referencing, shall arise in his place, who shall come with an army, enter the fortress of the king of the north, deal with them and prevail. He shall also carry their gods captive to Egypt, with their princes and their precious articles of silver and gold. He shall continue more years than the king of the north. So Bernice, the young wife that went up and was assassinated by the ex-wife, right? She's assassinated. Well, her brother comes to power in Egypt. He goes up and guess what he does? He invades Antioch in Syria and he assassinated Laodice, probably, I don't know if that's where Laodicea got his name, but assassinates the ex-wife who killed his sister, right? And then after he takes over Syria, what does he do? He plundered Syria, and ancient records, Jerome actually said, he took 40,000 talents of silver. Does anybody remember how much a talent is? 75 pounds, right? So 75 pounds is a talent. He took 40,000 talents, right? So 40,000 times 75 pounds, that much silver. And it says he took 2,500 idols, probably made from silver and gold, right? Or at least a wooden idol covered in gold. Took that from Syria and went back, right? So that's what verses 7 and 8 are talking about. Look at verse 8. He shall carry their gods captive to Egypt, with their princes and their precious articles of silver and gold, and shall continue more years than the king of the north. Okay? So that's the history that's verses 7 and 8. Okay? Verse 9. Also the king of the north shall come to the kingdom of the king of the south, but shall return to his own land. In 242 BC, Seleucus, who is from the north, is trying to take back all the plunder that just got taken from him, and he went to Egypt but was defeated and went home with nothing, right? Verse 10. However, now this is once again Seleucus II. Go to the next slide. Okay, this is a graphic that I found on the internet. I didn't make it, but it actually does a pretty good job, okay? It does a pretty good job of showing you the southern kingdom, all of these different Ptolemies, the northern kingdom, the kings of the north, all of these different ones, and in the center, the top line just tells you the other two regions that were divided, but once you move past that first line, ignore that. It's basically going down and showing you. So for instance, look, a general, the southern kingdom, will rule his own kingdom and become stronger. Look at the third line down. An alliance by marriage, Bernice, southern kingdom, to Antiochus in the north, okay? Ptolemy Euergetes, brother of Bernice, will conquer the northern kingdom. He was avenging his sister, right? So this is sort of a summary of these events, okay? So why don't you just go ahead and leave that up as we go through. And don't do what I'm tempted to take the slide down, is don't sit up there and just read the slide and not listen to what I'm saying. Unless you want to. You're an adult. You can do what you want, right? Okay. So look at verse 10, Daniel 11:10. However, this is Seleucus II, okay, his sons shall stir up strife and assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall come and overwhelm and pass through. Then he shall return to his fortress and stir up strife. Okay, so there are these two kings, Cyrannus and Antiochus III, who's also referred to as Antiochus the Great. He's the dad of the other Antiochuses, right? You got all that, right? You know, I'm saying it's difficult. Don't get frustrated at yourself if it takes some time to work through it. You can do it. So these are both sons of Seleucus II, and they mustered a great army to invade Egypt in about 225 BC. And obviously this angered the king of Egypt. All right, look at verse 11. The king of the south, which is who? Not the specific name, but which region? Egypt. All right. The king of the south shall be moved with rage and go out and fight with him, with the king of the north, who shall muster a great multitude, talking about his army, okay? But the multitude will be given into the hand of his enemy. Now, Antiochus III, okay, this is the son of the guy in the previous verse, okay? He gathered a massive army to do what his father could never do, which was conquer Egypt, all right? And he battled Ptolemy IV at Raphia, according to Polybius, who's a history, okay? And if you want to go back and read a lot of these primary resources, in my notes, I have, for instance, Ptolemy IV battle, Polybius Histories 5.79. You can go find this in the original resources and read all that stuff if you want. It's pretty fascinating. So in this battle, Ptolemy lost 2,200 men, and Antiochus, king of the north, lost 17,000 men. Okay, and so this battle gave the Ptolemies, or who? Egypt. All right, control of Palestine, the Holy Land, at this time. All right, look at Daniel 11:2. When he has taken away the multitude, when he destroyed the king of the north's army, his heart will be lifted up. He will cast down tens of thousands, but he will not prevail. He died in about his 30s, all right? He died pretty young. Look at verse 13. For the king of the north will return and muster a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come at the end of some years with a great army and much equipment. So the king of the north, who just lost this battle, lost 17,000 guys, and Egypt's only lost 2,200. He's going to go home and muster what? Even more. He's going to muster a big army, okay? So Antiochus III went up and built this giant army, partnering with Philip V of Macedon, a descendant way after Alexander the Great, okay? And defeated the Egyptians and then reclaimed Palestine for kings of the north, right? Verse 14. Now in those times many shall rise up against the king of the south. Also, now who's getting this vision? Whose vision is it? Daniel, right? Also violent men of your people. What do you think that references? To the Jews, all right? Also violent men of your people will exalt themselves in fulfillment of the vision, but they shall fall. The king of the south is Ptolemy Epiphanes, okay? And it says violent men of your, Daniel's people, the Jews. Josephus writes, and I give you the exact reference in the notes, he writes in his work, Jewish Antiquities, about how there were different Jews, a whole bunch of Jews, that joined up with the northern kingdom, the Seleucids, right? And they played a part in establishing his domination, right? They fought with him, okay? Which is sort of ironic. It says they will exalt themselves in the fulfillment of the vision. This vision is leading up to a guy named Antiochus IV, Epiphanes, who would desolate the temple in Jerusalem. So in a sense, these Jewish people who are being unfaithful are helping what? They don't realize it, but they're helping establish a nation, this guy Antiochus III, whose son is going to go and destroy the temple in Jerusalem and offer pigs on it, okay? That's what it means. They themselves will help in the fulfillment of the vision, okay? Look at Daniel 11:15. So the king of the north shall come and build up a siege mound and take a fortified city, and the forces of the south shall not withstand him. Even his choice troops will have no strength to resist. In world history after Antiochus III, you got all this, right? Okay, it's in the notes, all right? Just hopefully I'm not being too encouraging, but just hang tight, all right? You guys, this is a tough chapter, okay? Antiochus III, after he defeated Egypt, Ptolemy, who's the leader of what? Egypt, returned to Sidon. Remember Tyre and Sidon? Okay, returned to Sidon, which was a really well-fortified fortress city. And in 198, Antiochus III besieged that city, which is what this verse is talking about, and was victorious. All right, look at verse 16. But he, Antiochus, okay, who comes against him, Egypt, shall do according to his will, and no one should stand against him. He, Antiochus III, okay, from the north, shall stand in the glorious land with destruction in his power. Okay? This is Antiochus III. He controlled the Holy Land after this battle. Okay? You see how Palestine is in the middle? And all the way back in Daniel 9, Daniel said, basically, please restore us to our land, right? And God said in chapter 9, I'm going to send you back. The temple's going to be rebuilt. But the thing you should really be looking towards is the Messiah, right? Then he gives them a vision in chapter 10 about Persia and Greece and world history and fighting. And then in chapter 11, he's saying, let me give you some more details about all these things that are going to lead up in Jewish history. Okay. Verse 17. He, Antiochus, king of the north, shall also set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom, and upright ones with him. Thus he shall do. And now here's another alliance, okay? He shall give him the daughter of women to destroy it, but she shall not stand with him. So what this is talking about is the king of the north, who now wants to take over Egypt, is going to give what? He's going to give his daughter to the king of the south to once again try to make peace, but honestly what his goal was really to try to take over Egypt. And he thought, well, this is another way for me to do it, right? So Antiochus the Great sought to make peace, take charge of really, Egypt, and proposed a marriage between his daughter Cleopatra the first. Not the famous Cleopatra, which we'll get to later, right? Now, she probably got her name from this first Cleopatra, right? But this is the first Cleopatra who comes from the north, goes and marries the king of Egypt, okay, the king of the south. And Antiochus basically thought his daughter would help him conquer Egypt by marrying Ptolemy V, okay, and would strengthen him. She thought, hey, he thought this will strengthen my power with Egypt, because Egypt at this time has become friends with a really small nation that's been growing named Rome, okay? So Cleopatra goes down and marries Ptolemy V, who was 16 at the time, and she actually talked him into doing the exact opposite thing her dad wanted, right? That ever happened? Had a daughter disagree with her father? Never, right? Okay? So she goes down, marries Ptolemy, who's 16, and says, hey, you know what? Ignore my dad. We should partner with Rome. And that's exactly what they did, okay? So verse 18, after he, the dad, Antiochus III, he's not very happy about that, he shall turn his face to the coastlands and take many. But a ruler will bring the reproach against them to an end, and with the reproach removed, he shall turn back on him. So he's angry because his daughter, in his sense, has done what to him? Betrayed him, right? So he turns his face towards the coastlands. Most people think it would have been Greece, which was protected by Rome at the time. And then it says, the ruler brought reproach to these people being killed by Antiochus to an end, okay? I have a lot of notes in there about what battle this is possibly, but it was basically where Rome defeated him, Antiochus, okay? And in this battle, Antiochus, the king of the north, was defeated by Rome. And one of his punishments is that he was forced to, well, either die, I mean, he didn't choose that one, or sign a peace treaty with Rome. Okay, he basically said, Rome says, you're going to submit to me, and you're going to be my vassal king. So he was forced to sign a peace treaty with Rome and surrender 20 hostages. Okay, so the king of the north, I don't know where I am up there. The king of the north is defeated by Rome. Okay, and Rome says, here are the terms. You're going to give us 20 hostages, and one of the hostages they said you're going to give us is your son, Antiochus IV. He had 2 sons. He said, you're going to give us one of your sons. We're going to keep him captive in Rome so that you don't what? You don't act up. That's right. If you act up, what are we going to do to your son in Rome? Yeah, we're going to kill him, maybe torture him, right? Something that would keep Antiochus III in check. And he was also given a massive tribute, amount of money he had to pay Rome each year, all right? Verse 19, then he shall turn his face towards the fortress of his own land, but will stumble and fall and not be found. History says that in 187, Antiochus III was trying to raise money because this battle against Rome and Egypt had pretty much bankrupted him. So he's trying to raise money to pay the tribute to Rome, right? He doesn't have it. So he actually tried to go and plunder this temple to a god to get money, and in the process, it says that he died. So Antiochus III, after losing to Rome, being made to submit and pay tribute, now one of his kids is in Rome as a hostage, along with 19 other people. And so finally he dies trying to raise this money. Okay, look at verse 20. There shall arise in his place one who imposes taxes on the glorious kingdom. But within a few days he will be destroyed, not in anger or in battle. So following Antiochus III, okay, the death of the dad, what was one of the things Rome made him do? They made him send hostages to Rome and also pay what? A massive tribute, right? So when the dad dies and his oldest son comes into power, what's his son's main job? Pay the tribute, right? That's what it means there whenever it says, arise in his place one who imposes taxes on the glorious kingdom, all right? So his son, Seleucus IV Philopator, was not a war king, but his responsibility primarily was to pay Rome, right? And so he basically sent his finance minister, Heliodorus, to Jerusalem to plunder the temple, because Jerusalem had lots of what? Money. And he says, hey, we got to pay Rome somehow. Let's go plunder this, right? Allegedly, he had a dream. Second Maccabees, which is a historical book, not inspired. First and Second Maccabees give you a lot of history on this sort of period of time. And in the notes, I have Second Maccabees. This one is 3:7 through 40, if you want to read about this story. And his rule said he would rule for a short time in that verse, right? Look in 11:20 again. Within a few days he shall be destroyed, right? Is that a literal few days? No, it means a short time, okay? It's figurative language. So in a short time, what happened to him? His finance minister actually assassinated him, okay? A guy named Heliodorus. All right. Now 11:21. Most of this history has been pretty quick to get to this point, right? You had 4 verses about Greece and Persia and Greece, and then you had, what, 5 through 21, 16 verses that covered about 13 kings, and you're getting to now what's going to take up a majority of this chapter, which is this guy that we start reading about in 11:21. And in his place shall arise a vile person, to whom they will not give the honor of royalty, but he shall come in peaceably and seize the kingdom by intrigue. This is referencing Antiochus IV. Now, Antiochus IV previously was a captive where? In Rome. He was a prisoner in Rome, okay? He'd been a prisoner at Rome since his father's defeat. He was allowed to return to Syria because his brother had died, and so Rome said, okay, you can go back, right? And so he returned, and some people say he was probably, or maybe, even involved in the killing of his brother, right? I don't know all the details, and a lot of historians are kind of argue on that point, okay? And it was said in 1 Maccabees chapter 3 and verse 30 that instead of someone else who would have become the ruler, he was known to give lavish gifts. And it says, won the kingdom by intrigue or flattery, even with a small army, okay? So he comes back into town and he starts giving these people what? Lavish gifts. Let me actually read 1 Maccabees 3:30. It says, he feared that he should not be able to bear the charges any longer, nor to have such gifts to give so liberally as he did before, for he had abounded above the kings that were before him. So 1 Maccabees 3:30 says he gave more gifts than anybody before him, right? So if you're a general or someone, in leadership, and this guy comes in giving you all kinds of gifts and money, what do you think? I like this guy, right? It's like if you're at work and the boss you like gets replaced, and you're like, I don't like this new guy. And then he brings everybody and says, you're all getting raises. What do you think? The guy's all right, not so bad, right? So that's exactly what happens, okay? Antiochus comes in, gives these lavish gifts, and takes the kingdom. Look at verse 22. With the force of a flood, they shall be swept away from before him and be broken. And also the prince of the covenant. Now, what do you think the prince of the covenant is referencing under the law of Moses? High priest. Okay. And after the league is made with him, he shall act deceitfully, for he shall come up and become strong with a small number of people. I have a lot of notes that you can read about, but when Antiochus came in, there was a high priest, Onias III, who was the actual high priest, right? His brother Jason said to Antiochus, hey, I'll pay you if you make me high priest, right? So he did that, but then guess what? Some other guy, Menelaus, said, hey, I'll give you more money, and so guess what he did? He made him high priest, right? So basically, whoever would bribe Antiochus was made to be the high priest, right? I've got more notes in there you can read on your own, but that's what it's referencing there. Look at 11:24 through 26. Let's read all 3 of these together. He shall enter peaceably, even into the richest places of the province, and he shall do what his fathers have not done, nor his forefathers. He shall disperse among them the plunder, spoil, riches, and shall devise his plans against the strongholds only for a time. So, I said I was going to read 3 verses, but just summarize that one. What Antiochus did is he came in, sort of peacefully, offered money to everybody. Some of the places that they plundered in war, he gave all his money, or a lot of the money, to the people that plundered with him, to his army, which was not common, it seems like, a lot of times before that, okay? Verse 25. It said at the end of verse 24, but only for a time. Okay, he's going to change his tactics later. Verse 25. He shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south, which is who? That's right, Egypt. Okay. With a great army, and the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army. But he shall not stand, for they shall devise plans against him. Yes, those who eat of the portion of his delicacies shall destroy him. His army shall be swept away, and many shall fall down slain. Okay? So this seems to be about 170 BC. It's all in the notes. When Antiochus attacked Egypt, he conquered Memphis and all of the other, not this Memphis, that Memphis, okay? And all their other really wealthy cities, okay? First Maccabees 3:28 through 30 talks about how he shared all the plunder with his soldiers, okay? Ptolemy VI, all right, if you look back up in the verse, it says, they shall devise plans against him, verse 25. It said that the ruler of Egypt, who's Ptolemy VI at the time, was tricked by two of his advisors, all right? That's probably what verse 25 is referencing. They shall devise plans, those who eat of his delicacies. Two of his advisors that eat at his table with him. They actually devised a plan, and he was captured by Antiochus IV, right? And so Ptolemy VI, his younger brother, take a guess. Ptolemy VII, all right. Ptolemy VII became king, okay? Now, Antiochus decided, hey, I'm going to restore Ptolemy VI. I'm going to put him back in power, and if I do that, he's going to do what? He's going to like me. I made him king again, right? And so, okay, let's do a little, I didn't catch this, but, so Ptolemy the 6th and 7th, do you remember who their mom is? Which came from where? King of the North. She was the daughter of Antiochus III, who is that to Antiochus Epiphanes? It's his what? His dad, which makes her his sister, which makes her sons his what? His nephews, right? Trust me, I didn't figure this out. I read it, some other guy that did lots of research, and it took me a while to put it together. So you have these two nephews of him that Antiochus put one in power. So as soon as Antiochus starts to leave, what do you think the two nephews do? They decide, well, guess what? We don't need to fight each other. We're brothers, right? So what do? They rebel against Antiochus, okay? Antiochus Epiphanes, all right? Go verse 27. Both of these kings' hearts shall be bent on evil. They shall speak lies at the same table, but it shall not prosper, for its end will be at the appointed time. So before Antiochus can even make it back to Palestine, these two brothers have reconciled and say, we're going to rule Egypt together. What do you think that makes Antiochus? Happy or mad? Angry, that's right. Verse 28. While returning to his own land with great riches, his heart shall be moved against the holy covenant, so he shall do damage and return to his own land. So he's returning from his defeat in Egypt, and he goes right through where? Palestine, right? He goes right through Israel, right? So he plunders it. He takes some money, okay? I've got references to Josephus, Appian, First Maccabees, all these that reference this, okay? Now look at 1129. And this isn't when he destroyed Jerusalem. He just went through and killed a bunch of people and took some money, okay, a lot of money, and temple artifacts and stuff like that. But look at verse 29. At the appointed time he shall return and go towards the south, but it shall not be like the former or the latter, okay? In the former or the latter, when he goes down there, what happens? He wins, right? I think I said his defeat a minute ago. He wasn't defeated. He won, put the two brothers in, and then they decided, we're going to basically fight against him. But it makes him angry. So a few years later, he musters an army, and he goes back down to what he thinks he's going to conquer, like he's done every other time, right? Okay. In 168, he would go again to Egypt to try to teach his two nephews what? I'm going to teach you a lesson. That's right. You don't rebel against me, okay? But this time, they had someone waiting for him because Egypt had appealed to their ally who's still rising in power, which is who? Rome, okay? Verse 30. For ships from Cyprus, or Kittim, some translations say, shall come against him. So he says he's going to return, the king of the north. He's going to go down to fight against Egypt, but it's not going to be like it was before. For ships from Cyprus will come against him. Therefore he shall be grieved and return in a rage against the holy covenant and do damage. So he shall return and show regard for those who forsake the holy covenant. So the ships from Cyprus and Kittim refer to the region which would be where? Rome. Okay? So the ships, the army comes from Rome. Okay? This is in the notes, but the Roman forces led by Gaius Popilius Laenus, met Antiochus IV Epiphanes at Alexandria. They gave him an ultimatum: he could return home or face the wrath of Rome. And I have a long excerpt that I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's from the ancient historian Polybius. Okay? If you get the notes, you can read it in the actual notes. And I'm not going to read the whole thing for time's sake, but basically I'll read a little bit of it. Let me find it. How much time I got? Okay, I've got about 6 minutes. Yeah, why don't we read it? At the time when Antiochus approached Ptolemy and meant to occupy Pelusium, so when Antiochus tried to come down and occupy this area of Egypt, Popilius Laenus, the Roman commander, on Antiochus greeting him from a distance and held out his hand. So Antiochus comes and says what? I want to shake your hand. And the Roman general does what? He hands him a copy of the Senatus Consultum, right? And told him to read it first. So he said, before you shake my hand, you need to read this. And he hands him this document. Not thinking it would be proper to make the conventional sign of friendship before he knew if the intentions of him greeting were friendly or hostile. But when the king, Antiochus, king of the north, after reading this document, said he would like to communicate with his friends about this, Popilius acted in a manner which was thought to be offensive and exceedingly arrogant. Okay? So basically, he hands him this document, and Antiochus says what? I got to talk to my buddies first. You know, give me some time to talk to my friends to see what we want to do about this document, right? What do you think he's doing? He's stalling, right? And this is what happens. It says the Roman general was carrying a stick cut from a vine, and with this he drew a circle around Antiochus, okay, and told him that you must remain inside that circle until you give us the decision about your letter. So he says, you're not talking to your buddies. You're going to make this decision right now, and if you step outside of that circle, what's going to happen? You're going to be killed. The king was astonished at this authoritative proceeding, but after a few moments' hesitation, he said that he would do all that the Romans demanded of him. Upon this, the Roman general and his suite all grasped him by the hand and greeted him warmly. So they wouldn't shake his hand until he said, I'm going to what? Surrender. And then they said, all right, now we can shake hands. Okay? The letter ordered him to put an end to all of his wars with Ptolemy, with Egypt. Okay? So as a fixed number of days were allowed to him, he led his army back to Syria, deeply hurt and complaining indeed, but yielding to the circumstances for the present. So basically, the letter also said, you got 30 days, right, to get back to your country, or else null and void, right? That's how a contract works. Popilius, the Roman general, after arranging matters in Alexandria and exhorting the two kings there, that's the two brothers we talked about, okay, the two brothers, they ordered them to send Polyarchus to Rome and sailed for Cyprus, wishing to lose no time in expelling the Syrian troops that were in the island. So they said, hey, there's this guy's army some other place. Now that we've got him retreating, we're going to go take care of the rest of his army, right? So this is the instance that you have being described in verse 30, okay? Look at verse 31. And forces shall be mustered by him. Now this is talking about Antiochus. Remember, the focus is on him. He's just gotten beat by Rome, and so now he's going home because Rome kicked him out, and he's like a kid taking his ball and going home, right? Is he happy? No, verse 31. They shall defile the sanctuary fortress. They shall take away the daily sacrifices and place there the abomination of desolation. And so somehow a rumor had started that Antiochus had died. And so Jason, who was the second high priest, the one that said, I'll bribe you, but then got outbribed later, he tried to kill the third guy, the biggest briber, Menelaus, right? So this little revolt had broken out in Palestine. And Antiochus heard of this on his way home and thought the people were revolting. He took his army and took out his frustration on Jerusalem. 2 Maccabees 5, 12-14 says about 40,000 people were slain, and he took 40,000 more as slaves. He banned temple worship and sacrifices. That's what the verse means. He shall take away the daily sacrifices. Okay? He banned it. Torah scrolls were publicly burned. Circumcision, keeping the Sabbath, kosher laws were all forbidden to be observed on the penalty of what? Death. In 167 to 168, he established an altar to the Greek deity Zeus, who the Romans called Jupiter, in the Jewish temple on the altar of burnt offering and sacrificed pigs on the altar. What do you think? How do you think that was? What do you think that represented to the Jews? Yeah, the worst thing you could do, right? It's supposed to be God's holy place, his altar, and you're sacrificing unholy, unclean animals on it, okay? This is what's referred to as the abomination of desolation, okay, which will be referenced in the New Testament. what happened here was the antitype, the like figure, the shadow of what's going to happen later in the time after Jesus in AD 70, where Rome is going to come in, and Matthew 24 says the abomination of what? Matthew 24 uses the same language. It says, just like that happened in Daniel's day, Rome is going to come and do this now. Not Antiochus Epiphanes like the first time, but now Rome is going to come and do the same thing. So this would happen again in AD 70 when the Roman general Titus destroyed the temple. Look at verse 32. Those who do wickedly against the covenant, he shall corrupt with flattery, but the people who know their God shall be strong and carry out great exploits. There's a lot of people that submitted to all this. They submitted to rejecting the law of Moses, but then there's others who did what? Didn't. They fought it. That's mainly what 1st and 2nd Maccabees, the historical books, are about. We talked about this earlier. It's about the sons of this man like Judas Maccabeus, right? And his sons, Matthias and his sons, Judas Maccabeus, which means hammer, and how they revolted and killed the forces and led to later the retaking of Jerusalem until Rome sort of, I guess, took them over. I'm going to stop in verse 33. We're going to finish the last 10 verses of chapter 11 next week, and then we'll do chapter 12 next week as well. Chapter 12 is only 13 verses, where this is 45. So I feel like we'll finish the rest next week, and then we'll do chapter 12, wrap up the book, and that'll be it for the quarter. So thanks for your attention. If you want these notes, I think it'll make a whole lot more sense when you read it for yourself. Sign up in the back. There's a list. You can write your email address down, and we'll send you the notes and a link to all these classes, which are on YouTube as well. So thanks for your attention.